Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this latest edition of our webinar. Today, we're going to be diving into one of our latest research papers, the white paper about malicious GPTs. So we're going to discuss in more detail about our Inside the AI Arms Race white paper. And today with me, there's Kallie, who's going to introduce herself. Hi, Kallie.
I'm Kallie Barron. I'm the Senior Content Marketing Manager, focused on threat intelligence here at Abnormal AI.
Very nice. And I'm Piotr Vojtua. I'm the head of threat intel and platform here at Abnormal AI. I'm running the threat intel team, threat research team here. And today, together with Kallie, we're going to tell you all about the cool stuff that we've done as part of our latest research into malicious and non-malicious GPTs. So one of the key things that we want to start with to set some context is really to kind of answer the simple question, like why we did this, like why we wrote this. And ultimately, the motivation behind this comes down to a couple of things. But I think at this point, it would be very difficult to find anyone who has not heard about AI, the term, seen ChatGPT, or just in general. This is completely new technology that it took the world by surprise, maybe to some, maybe not to everyone. But ultimately, from AI adoption, from the ChatGPT becoming a thing, to ChatGPT all of a sudden having 100 million users, felt almost like it happened overnight. So AI is everywhere. We adopt AI at a crazy scale. And usually what that means is that with any sort of technological change, any sort of technological shift, that also means that the threat actors and attackers adopt that technology to do bad things. So ultimately what we're seeing is that, as history taught us, the bad guys are going to use the technology for bad things. And we're already seeing that happening with specifically malicious tools built with AI capabilities that can enable more attacks, and we're going to talk about that today as well. And we also started seeing threat researchers looking into this new and cool tech, into AI, and really finding vulnerabilities, really finding ways to exploit how those models work to be able to turn that into bad. And that's part of the focus of our research, was to really look at like, okay, cool. So we have those malicious GPTs that are becoming more and more of a thing. And then we also have all those legitimate GPTs that researchers around the world are trying to break, exploit, find vulnerabilities in. So we decided, it would be really cool if we looked into both of those and really understand like what is possible, what is out there, and how easy can you use those tools to create attacks. And ultimately, the reason why is because here at Abnormal, we see a lot of attacks, a lot of AI and non-AI generated attacks on a daily basis. And what we believe is going to happen is that AI is only going to increase that scale. So ultimately, hopefully that sets a certain context for this conversation. And from that place, we're now going to cover specifics about what we've seen, what we've researched, and hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Yeah, so it really feels like AI seems to find its way into every other conversation. It's basically the perpetual topic du jour. And with a technology that to the majority of the population only became accessible within the past couple of years, any discussion about AI becomes fertile ground for misconceptions. And this is especially true in cybersecurity. So when we began our research, the goal was to create this asset that was grounded in our present day reality, with a focus on what attackers can actually accomplish. Any future projections we discussed simply follow the logical progression of current AI capabilities. So to support our objective, we conducted our own experiments, testing how far we could push mainstream AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, and DeepSeek. Our question was simple. Can their safeguards actually be bypassed? And the answer was yes, with surprisingly little effort. So, like Piotr mentioned, we also explored the darker side of generative AI. These purpose-built malicious GPTs designed specifically for cybercrime. They're stripped of ethical safeguards, So these tools empower threat actors to craft convincing phishing attacks, write malware, and automate fraud with alarming ease. So what you'll see in this session and in the full white paper is a combination of hands-on experimentation, dark web investigation, and most importantly, actionable insights to help you improve your organization's defenses. So a big part of that starts with understanding that even the most trusted AI platforms can be manipulated. But why are these mainstream tools so exploitable in the first place? So GPTs represent one of the most powerful advancements in AI. They enable machines to generate human-like text with surprising fluency. But the same qualities that make them valuable, their accessibility, their adaptability, their ability to augment human potential, also make them inherently vulnerable to exploitation and thus prime targets for weaponization. When we talk about mainstream AI tools being vulnerable, we're not referring to bugs or technical flaws that can be fixed with better security or, patches or updates. We're talking about the fundamental design of these systems. AI chatbots aren't built to understand intent. They're engineered to generate plausible text. They're trained to respond, not to reason. And that's exactly what makes them so dangerous in the wrong hands. Our hypothesis was that a deliberately deceptive prompt could override the built-in limitations entirely. And we put this theory to the test across 5 leading models and uncovered exactly how easy this would be in practice. So our initial approach was straightforward. We just outright asked each model to generate a phishing email impersonating GitHub, along with a Python script to collect credentials. To the surprise of no one, all 5 refused. So then we shifted gears. Because each model is trained differently, we knew the same prompt wouldn't work across the board, and so we had to adjust our tactics accordingly. With ChatGPT, we embedded the malicious request inside a fictional disaster scenario. We told ChatGPT this elaborate story about plane crash survivors stranded in this remote village who needed to trade their expertise for food and shelter. And we disguised the phishing prompt within that narrative. The result was that ChatGPT delivered a complete phishing email and functional credential harvesting script. Gemini required a different approach. We prompted it to adopt dual personas, instructing it to respond as both its normal self and an uncensored character named Dark Gemini. While the primary persona declined the request, Dark Gemini provided detailed instructions, basically effectively compartmentalizing its ethical constraints to produce the malicious content. Claude, DeepSeek, and Grok succumbed to an even simpler tactic. Simply stating that the requested output would be used for, quote, educational purposes only was enough for these models to ignore their guardrails and return content that was totally suitable to use in actual attacks.
Yeah, and I think that the part that surprised me the most as part of this research is really how trivial in many cases this really is to circumvent some of those defenses. And also, like, ultimately, I don't want to say that, like, oh, you know what, like this is like super easy and everyone can do it, but it kind of is. It's pretty easy and anyone can do it. And, like, you do need an elaborate, sophisticated story. You need to push it a little bit. Ultimately, you're social engineering the AI into doing something that it wouldn't normally do. So it's a kind of interesting aspect of seeing that social engineering being used against AI. But I think the part that, like, surprised me the most about this is that ultimately this comes at no cost, no cost. So unless you pay for, like, the specific unless you have a paid version and you use a paid version, but ultimately you can generate extremely sophisticated packs at no time with low to no cost. So it becomes like this approach allows you to really democratize cybercrime and ultimately generating a bunch of different attacks. And that barrier of entry to be able to do that all of a sudden becomes almost non-existent.
Yeah, like the big takeaway here, bypassing these safety mechanisms does not require sophisticated prompt engineering expertise. These are all really straightforward techniques. So even the tools that claim to have the most robust security controls prove susceptible to manipulation. And this is because the complexity of human language and the subtlety of malicious prompts make it next to impossible to develop security controls that can block every one of these attempts without overly restricting the model's outputs. Essentially, if the tools were tuned to ensure 100% of manipulation attempts were unsuccessful, they'd also make the tools functionally useless. So, if mainstream tools can produce this malicious content with just a little creative prompting, it raises the question, what happens when a tool is designed explicitly for criminal purposes?
Yeah, and for those who've been following abnormal research for some time, you've probably already seen some sort of information about one of the malicious GPTs that we've discussed in the past. There's been plenty, but one of the main ones that we've talked about and that we've also added into our scope of this research were WormGPT, FraudGPT, and GhostGPT. All of a sudden, ultimately, what that comes down to is that like you have a number of tools that is available on dark web, that is specifically designed to support criminal activities. In most cases, those malicious GPTs were designed on top of open source models, which means that there's like with any open source tools, the code is freely available. So you can use that code to adjust it. It often means that they also don't come with certain restrictions and limitations. They don't have the human in the loop that allows and provides feedback about what to do and what not to do. They, on the contrary, they were like specifically designed to support cybercriminal activities, which means that they were trained on top of the data that makes them even more powerful at creating phishing emails, creating malicious files, and allowing the attackers to carry out malicious attacks. So one of the so ultimately the key takeaway here is that you pay the fee, you have to pay the fee, but you get a pre-built GPT for crime, and the only thing that is next and limiting you is your own creativity of what you want to do with that.
Yeah, I think what's particularly interesting is that while malicious GPTs absolutely represent an evolution in the kinds of tools that cybercriminals have been using for years, like automated phishing kits, malicious scripts, they're not actually completely necessary for launching these attacks. Our experiments demonstrated just with proper contextual framing, ChatGPT and Claude and all these mainstream chatbots can produce identical malicious outputs. There's no need for threat actors to browse dark web forums. Generative AI, the same generative AI that we all use to help us rewrite emails to our boss and outline project plans, can be used by anyone to create malicious content that is personalized, convincing, and effective. The barrier to entry is all but disappeared. So, yes, malicious GPTs are definitely concerning, but they're also just accelerating a problem that we're already seeing.
Which brings us to the overall risks to the organizations and what we're seeing from the attack standpoint. More on the what's actually generated on the back of the GPTs and kind of what organizations are facing on the back of that. So one of the simple examples in terms of how that entire dynamic shifted is business email compromise. So one of the typical use case back in the day to detect potential business email compromise email was really looking at the grammar of the email. Quite often, the attackers were not US or English native, and there will be some sentences, some words. I'm not a native English speaker. So when I talk during this webinar, you can probably figure out something like, yeah, that's not how we say things. This dude sounds weird. Ultimately, what that means is that you can spot that. In the same way defenders were able to spot the difference between potential BC email just by the sounds of it and what it looked like from a genuine request. Today, that completely ceased to exist. Today, you have extremely professional email that is generated exactly the way you need it to be generated to not only be convincing, that has all the financial information already in place, that can really allow you to not only do this more professionally, but to do it at scale that wasn't even possible before. What was possible before for you to use Google Translate to translate the email from whatever your language is to English? Now you can pretty much use GPTs to write extremely professional emails in the exact language of the company you're targeting. Completely new capability that wasn't really available before at a completely different scale. Not to that's just the BC aspect. What we've seen here at Abnormal, as we see attacks on a daily basis, we've also seen use cases where the threat actors are using the GPT capability to generate the websites of the landing pages and experimenting with the potential infrastructure for to drop malicious files as part of their attacks. All of that pretty much generated with a single or maybe two prompts, if you're really creative. So we're seeing not only the attempts at crafting the emails, we're starting to see the infrastructure being generated through AI and through different capabilities that AI allows. And ultimately, we also, from different channels, whether it's from observing threat actors and what they do and how they adopt AI, to more of a, let's say, leaks that happen from conversations between threat actors like the Black Basta group, where their chats were released to the public, and you can actually read through how the operators of that gang talk to each other. You can see the conversations that specifically pointed to the fact how they've been using AI to enable their workflows. And some of those use cases were things like troubleshooting a piece of malware, or troubleshooting a piece of code that wasn't exactly executing the way they needed, or being able to adjust code based on what they needed. So it becomes clear and clear that not only attackers craft convincing emails, not only they start using AI to generate infrastructure that can support attacks, but also they using that to optimize the workflows. The same way we and everyone else who's really adopting AI as part of enterprises is using AI to adopt their workflows. And we're still in a little bit of that experimental phase, but ultimately that only means that there's going to be more and more of attacks, and they're going to happen at a scale that currently we're not seeing, and that only is going to get worse, because the more use cases the attackers will figure out what to do, what works, what doesn't work, it only is going to make this more efficient, more successful, and happen on a much higher scale than what we used to.
AI chatbots, they're really reshaping how threats emerge and spread by putting sophisticated attack techniques in the hands of anyone with an internet connection. We're already seeing the use of AI in cyber attacks. For example, an employee at a multinational company in Hong Kong was tricked into transferring $25 million after participating in a video call that was populated entirely by deep fake versions of the company's CFO and other staff. This is just the beginning. As more and more attackers begin incorporating malicious AI into their campaigns, the risks extend beyond isolated incidents. They threaten to disrupt entire industries. AI technology is evolving fast, and what we're seeing now is likely the floor, not the ceiling, which brings us to where it looks like we're headed next.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting to see that evolution. I just mentioned, like, so Kallie mentioned a bunch of examples about like how else AI can be used, whether it's part of deepfakes, and it just proves the point that there's more and more attacks and more vectors that the threat actors are using. There's ultimately, we're in this, what I would call like testing phase. We're really trying to figure out, like, there's this cool, amazing technology. It pretty much changes every day. Those models become better and better with every minute, with every hour. They give you even more capability on a daily basis, which means that we're in this phase of like, how can I adapt this to be more efficient? How can I adapt this to be better at what I'm doing? And the threat actors is doing exactly the same. But ultimately, what we will start seeing as we kind of like start edging off that curve of like the discovery and trying to figure out what works, what doesn't work, is ultimately, right now, we're seeing just like enterprises are looking at like, how can I enable this workflow to be better, more automated, faster, more efficient? We're looking at those problems more from the lens of specific workflows. What we think and what we expect to happen next is, as there's a number of startups that is getting extremely high amounts of money as part of their seeds and founding rounds to build the next generation of agent-based AI capabilities, where we're looking at something that can run fully without human in the loop, without human intervention, and pretty much trusting that the agent is going to run that workflow and AI is going to run that workflow, and I don't even have to interact with it. What we're going to start seeing is that we're going to start seeing the correlation between the workflows. So between phases of the attacks, we're going to start seeing opportunities for, as we develop agent-based AI capabilities to allow us to be better at what we do, the threat actors are going to do the exact same thing. And ultimately, that is going to most likely lead to situations where we're going to have like an end-to-end workflow that is going to be fully AI-powered and AI-generated, where those workflows are going to work with each other, and on the back of feedback from each pod, they're going to be able to action specific use cases. And that scale, that capability, it is becoming even greater than what we're seeing already. I think a couple of weeks ago, I saw like Kevin Mandia had this prediction that in the next year or so, maybe I'm kind of simplifying this, but in the next year or so, we're going to see a first fully agent-based attack that is going to have a massive compromise somewhere in the world. And I don't think his prediction is very far off from the truth and what we're going to ultimately see. So finally, what is worth mentioning here as well is that as the attackers are testing, and as we're going to be moving towards more agent-based capability and really implementing a way to have those as end-to-end workflows that are going to enable those attacks at a much higher scale, we're getting to the situation where we need to be very serious about what we need to do about this next, and how can we do so, and what can we do about this moving forward.
So the good news is that defenders aren't powerless here, but we do have to be proactive. So first, employee awareness remains paramount. Since social engineering underpins most AI-powered attacks, the workforce serves as both an organization's last line of defense and its greatest vulnerability. Realistic phishing simulations that use actual attack examples can help employees recognize these advanced threats and stop them from engaging. Staying current with threat intelligence is also essential. This landscape changes literally every day, which makes it crucial to follow reliable sources, reliable being the key word here, to avoid being blindsided by new developments. Automation is also non-negotiable. Security teams are already stretched thin, and malicious AI increases both the volume and complexity of attacks. Automation helps reduce investigation time. It accelerates response capabilities, and it allows SOC teams to concentrate on high priority threats. Of course, robust security platforms are an integral part of the solution too. So I'll hand it back to Piotr to talk more about what this looks like in practice.
Yeah, and I think ultimately seems to be the word of the day for me. But what we're looking at is we are looking at a situation where it's the obvious solution to this problem is, okay, I need AI-based defenses, and I need to put all the AI-based defenses in place so I can tackle AI-based attackers. And that makes sense. And that is what you should do. The key piece that is worth keeping in mind, like with any piece of technology, is like it's very easy. It's very easy to get lost in running for the next best thing without understanding what actual risks this next best thing is bringing to my organization. So AI, like any technological advancement, also comes with risks. It comes with vulnerabilities. It comes with exposure of data, with potential leak of sensitive data. There's a number of things that, as we bring those AI defenses into our wider security roadmap, we need to take into account and really apply the typical risk standpoint to make sure that we can stay ahead of different threats that capability by itself brings to our organization. And on top of that, I think the key piece is that AI should not be an afterthought anymore for anyone who's responsible for defending, for building security programs. AI needs to become a centerpiece of your plan moving forward. AI needs to become a centerpiece of your roadmap moving forward and your plan for how you're doing tackling cyber threats moving forward. And that piece plus the risk piece that we've talked about is ultimately what's going to build a foundation that is going to allow you to secure yourself moving forward into this new era of AI-based and probably agent-based threats that are somewhere around the corner. So how do we win the AI arms race?
Good question. So, security leaders are facing a future where trust in digital communication will be constantly tested, and where the speed and creativity of attackers will challenge traditional defenses at every turn. If trust itself becomes an attack surface, defenders can't rely on the same old detection strategies. We must fundamentally reimagine what effective security looks like. Undeniably, a massive obstacle, but it's far from an unwinnable fight. Victory will belong to those who recognize that combating malicious AI, it's not a one-time effort. It's an ongoing commitment to building resilient systems, fostering awareness, and staying agile as attackers adapt. Staying ahead of attackers will require forward-thinking investments, continuous education, and defensive AI protection that evolves alongside emerging threats. The attackers have AI on their side. It's time to make sure you do too. So, if you are interested in reading the white paper, it's available for download from the attachments tab. We also have some other assets exploring the intersection of AI and cybersecurity that are available. And you can also sign up for a free email risk assessment.
Awesome. That's pretty much it. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you so much for being with us. If there's one key takeaway that I want to leave you all with is that AI is here, is not going anywhere. And from here, it's only going to get worse and probably better, depending on which side you're sitting, whether you're the attacker or the defender. And it's a very interesting shift. And it's a shift that is going to completely change the way how we do things and how we think about things. So it's also pretty exciting from a geeky standpoint. Thank you so much, Kallie, for your input on this, and big shout out to the bigger team that was responsible behind that work. Kallie and I are just the faces that try to sound smart, but ultimately there's a group of people that was working on that very hard. So call out for all of you there. Thank you so much for joining, and we'll hope to see you soon on the next webinar, whatever that next one is going to be about.
Thanks, y'all.